Welcome to the Red Flag Mania podcast, your one-stop shop for all things fraud. We're diving deep into the world of scams, corruption, and whistleblowers. Think of us as your personal fraud detectives, unearthing the hidden scandals, the brave souls who dare to expose them, and the lessons we can all learn from their experiences. So grab your popcorn, start your walk, or sit back and get ready to dive into the murky depths of the human condition. We're your hosts, Roni Jackson
and Kelly Richmond Pope,
and this is the Red Flag Mania podcast. And now, Red Flag Mania listeners, the continuation of Abraham Bolden's story.
Now, I haven't revealed this before, but I'm revealing it now because they can't hurt me anymore. You see, I can't move now. I'm about out of here. And if they gave me life in prison, they'd be sentencing me to about a year and a day. I was standing outside of the Oval Office, and this was in June of 1961. The Vice President came and went into the Oval Office, and there was a humongous argument. Bobby Kennedy was in there, too. There were three of them. And they were arguing and hollering so loud, and they were talking about the issues, campaign. And when Johnson came out of the Oval Office, I was standing on the side of the door, and I heard President Johnson say, "Don't F with me, you SOB. I'll get you." As he walked out, then he looked at me, and he asked his chauffeur, who had been waiting, sitting in a chair near the Oval Office, "Who is that guy?" Talking about me. See, the chauffeur told him, "I don't know." Johnson walked out, and I followed him. Walked out the White House, and he got in that back seat of the and slammed that door so hard he almost broke the glass. And I know then that if the president goes down, this guy's going to be behind it. Because I had heard him say, "Oh, F with me, you SOB. I'll get you." So that's the first time I revealed that. And publicly. I have told Roger Stone, he wrote a book about his suspicion of LBJ as being behind the assassination of the president. And that's going to be my protection, you might as well say, until the day I die. Because Roger Stone is mixed up with everybody. In the Russian thing, he's mixed up in the Cuban thing, he's mixed up in everything that's undercover, you know. So Roger Stone is on my side. Now, when the president was assassinated, with me having all of this information, Johnson appointed a Warren Commission in order to try to determine who assassinated President Kennedy. But what I was not aware of, that Katzenbach, who was the Deputy Attorney General and took over the Attorney Generalship from Robert Kennedy after his brother was assassinated, had put out a memo and sent it to Bill Myers, who was the president's confidant, that Lee Harvey Oswald had to be known as the only assassin of President John F. Kennedy. So that made the Warren Commission a phony. Here on December the 6th, a memo from the Attorney General of the United States, countersigned by J. Edgar Hoover, and they are supposed to be investigating who assassinated the president. And the memo said that it must be presented to the public that Lee Harvey Oswald was the only assassin of President Kennedy. I didn't know that memo existed at that time. I wouldn't have been less vocal, but I wouldn't have tried to go to Washington, D.C. and testify before the Warren Commission. That's what I tried to do in May of 1964, because I knew that the agents were committing perjury before the Warren Commission. They were not telling the truth, because I saw them destroy files in Chicago pertaining to the assassination plot against President Kennedy, and I heard conversations about, don't tell them nothing, and Secret Service agents have to keep their mouths closed, stay out of it. Such warnings such as that. So I would have now, knowing that what they did, I would have written it out and gone to a newspaper reporter, someone like Mary Mitchell, or, and then reveal that and let them make a story out of it by an anonymous Secret Service agent. I wouldn't have stuck my neck that far out. But I'm thinking that the Warren Commission is looking for the truth. See? When I went to Washington, D.C. in May of 1964, I visited the White House in order to try to find the phone number and extension of J. Lee Rankin, who was counsel for the Warren Commission. I couldn't find it, but I went and made a telephone call to the switchboard operator, since I couldn't find it myself, and asked her if she had the extension. And she told me no. I guess, I don't know why. This was on May 17th. On May 18th, I was in Washington, D.C., in the Treasury Building. Agent Howard Anderson, who was the personnel director, came into the room and said, "We need you back in Chicago right away." I said, "What happened?" He said that they just busted a counterfeiting plant and they need you to go undercover. Now, this was supposed to be in one of the suburbs of Chicago, an all-white suburb. So I was suspicious then. They put me on a plane. 2 agents came with me and took me to the courthouse, which was at 219 South Dearborn at the time. They put me in a room. It was about 94, 95 degrees. And I'm wondering what's going on. And I'm just sitting there. Finally, about 5 hours later, Mr. Martinov, who was a special agent in charge of the Chicago office, came into the room with Ed Hanrahan, who was the DA, federal prosecutor. Mr. Martinov said, "We're charging you with soliciting a bribe." I said, "That's ridiculous." He said, "You prove it." So there I was. Now, when the first trial came about, I found out the witnesses against me was one guy named Joseph Spagnoli. I had been in on arrest of Joseph Spagnoli for counterfeiting $100 bonds. The other one was African-American Frank Jones. I had arrested Frank Jones twice, counterfeit $5 bills. He was on his way to prison, and if he had been convicted of the arrest that I made in May of 1964, he would have gone down to prison for the rest of his life. These were the witnesses that they had against me. At the end of the first trial, after all the testimony was taken, the jury went in to deliberate. During the process of deliberation, the judge called the jury out They were deadlocked and said, we can't come to a decision. The judge told the jury now, in my opinion, the defendant is guilty. Now go back in and deliberate with the information I just gave you. It had never happened in all judicial history where a judge told a jury to find the defendant guilty. And it hasn't happened since then. It only happened in my case, my single case. And the jury still remained deadlocked. There was a sister on the jury, Anna B. Hightower. And I heard her screaming and hollering in the jury room. This was a setup. Anybody can see that. These witnesses were lying. And lo and behold, on January 25th of 1965, Spagnuolo was on trial in his own counterfeiting case. And the question came about his testimony in my case. And Spagnuolo said, I committed perjury in that case. And they said, why? He said, because the U.S. attorney told me to. And when the U.S. attorney's site tried to deny, Spagnuolo went in his pocket and pulled out a sheet of legal paper and says, here is the testimony that he told me to say, and he handed in Sight's handwriting, Spagnuolo's testimony, date this happened, date this happened, date this happened. So we appealed the case to the Supreme Court, and they denied it. Even though in the Court of Appeals here in Chicago, the chief judge called the U.S. attorney before the bench and said, we have a serious charge here. So during the argument before the Court of Appeals here, we have a charge that the government, the United States government, solicited perjured testimony in a federal criminal trial. And he told them to go get Sights. So Sights came in the courtroom. And the chief judge asked Sights, he says, this is a very serious issue. He says, I want to know, did you solicit perjury in the Bolden trial? Sights tried to explain, and the chief judge asked him again and said, no, this is a yes or no question. Did you commit perjury or have Spagnuolo to commit perjury in the Bolden trial? Sights stood on his 2 feet and said, Your Honor, I refuse to answer on the grounds that my answer may tend to incriminate me. He took the Fifth Amendment, and the Court of Appeals upheld the conviction, regardless of the fact that Spagnuolo had admitted that he committed perjury, regardless of the fact that there was evidence, written testimony, that Spagnuolo admitted before the judge, the same judge that was my judge, Judge Pratt, admitted under oath that he committed perjury. So now, after I went to trial a second time, during the deliberation of the jury, the judge cleared the courtroom and said, we're going to have a recess until 9 o'clock the next day, August 12th of 1964. Everybody's got to leave the courtroom except the jury. And on my way home, I heard a flash from WBBM radio said the jury has reached a decision. After the judge had cleared the courtroom of all outside people, the only people that were inside the federal building were FBI agents, Secret Service agents, the jury, and the judge. And he told us that the verdict would be sealed until the next morning. So the next morning, they found me guilty and they put me in a penitentiary on June 26, 1966, after we appealed the case all the way to the Supreme Court. They put me in Terre Haute prison. From Terre Haute, they sent me to Fort Leavenworth. That was very unusual because I was the agent of the government. And they had me in a population with all these killers and people at Fort Leavenworth doing double life. Some of these people had killed federal agents. And I would go out in the yard amongst those people at Fort Leavenworth. They didn't care about my life. But I didn't have a fear of what was going on. So now they transferred me to Springfield Medical Center in Springfield, Missouri. Now that's a dangerous penitentiary. Springfield has 4 penitentiaries in one. It's a transportation center for prisoners because it's centrally located between the east and the west. So you got Missouri. So prisoners that's coming from the east would be housed at that central point and then picked up by the marshal and going on westward. So it was a terminal point. It also was a hospital. People with diabetes or need operation or anything like that would be sent to Springfield because it's a medical center. Now, they also had the camp personnel, and that's where they assigned me, to the camp. But I knew that wouldn't be for long. And then they have the psychiatric division. I had already planned. I knew that they were going to do that. So I hired an attorney just in case. July the 7th, 1967, 3 officers came to my bunk in the camp and told me to put my clothes on and follow them. Put my shoes on. They took me to the psychiatric division. And my mind was just as clear as it is now. 3 o'clock in the morning. We walked down that hall. Seemed like forever. And we came to this thick steel door. And there was another steel door about 6 feet from the thick steel door. And when they opened that steel door, you could hear the psychiatric inmates in there screaming and cursing. Some of them were, as I say, walking me to the office. Some of them were throwing feces up against the window. So they took me in the office, stripped me of my clothes. I said, "What's going on?" He said, "We put you in psychiatric ward." I said, "Why?" He told me that I was embarrassing the government. I said, "How?" "By your mouth." He made me strip naked, put me behind that steel door, and about 3 hours later, these guards came and said, "It's medication time." I said, "I'm not on medication." He said, "You are now." I said, "You're supposed to go to court, put anybody on medication." He said, "You're going to either take it by tablet or we're going to give it to you in your rear end." He said it in more gross terms than that. So I took the tablet. It was 175 milligrams. I remembered the name of it, but they were trying to prepare me to take Thorazine or one of the heavier drugs. So I had to find a way to defeat that. And I did, because daily they were feeding me this 175 grams of Elevir. We were coming there twice a day. And I was getting groggy and almost being under the influence of those drugs. So one day I went to the little window that was looked into my room from the outside, and I was searching for a place inside the cell that would be a spot where you couldn't see from the window. So I worked out a plan whereby I would take the medication in front of them. And they closed the door, went into the latrine and threw it all back up. And I had saved a part of whatever food that they brought me to eat it later. Now, there was a big risk on that, man, because if they had come in the cell and seen that food over on the side, then they would have had ample reason to say, this guy is weak in mind and go into court and declare me insane, is what they wanted to do. So he's refusing to eat. Oh, man. So I had to take that risk. And that's what I did. Once that the American people have firmly understood what happened to our president on November 22nd, 1963, they will see that it was a coup that took over America and reestablished the direction that America was going in a reverse action. That this was not just some angry guy sitting in a window, some nobody. This was a arranged group with about 6 to 8 gunmen and dealer players, a well planned. All the files haven't been released yet. The most important files have not been released. There are a few that should be released concerning me, what happened to me. I'm sure that I'm in the FBI and Secret Service files concerning the president. I'm positive. And the government is still holding back. And it's like a chess game. Trump is under siege about his Russian connection. Trump is saying, I won't release all of the files, but if there's such incrimination comes out against me, then I will release some of these files that the CIA are still fighting to keep hid. I want to be remembered as a person that told the truth, that was visionary enough to see what's coming and to try to warn our people of the fallacies in their thinking in the mathematical problem. You have to solve the character of the unknown before you can solve the problem.
My mind is blown. So, the U.S. government,
Yup.
Lyndon B. Johnson,
Maybe.
the KKK,
Could be.
the Secret Service,
I don't know.
against one black man
That's what he
and
said.
his word.
That's what he said.
That is mind-boggling.
Doesn't it make you give you like chills?
It gives me such chills to think that the first black Secret Service agent got this kind of treatment. Now, I don't know if it's that far-fetched, though.
Here's what I think when I think about Mr. Bolden is, would I be the kind of whistleblower he was? Or would I keep my mouth closed?
Zips.
Or would I be vocal? These are some powerful organizations.
Well, being a whistleblower changes your life.
Sure
And
enough.
that's what happened to him.
Sure enough.
I mean, this is incredible. I can't wait to hear the rest of his story, and I hope that all of our listeners stay close, because this is real popcorn story. This is a real
nail
popcorn.
biter, right?
This is it. I mean, this could be in a film. And, you know, it's interesting. You think this is 50, 60 years ago.
You're right.
And I think that now, more than ever, we are identifying with this brand of injustice.
Absolutely. Stay tuned for more, right?
Stay tuned. Red Flag Mania Podcast.